Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, our heads of state and government declare 2020 as a year to silence the guns in order to create conducive conditions for Africa's development. And with that, and despite progress made, Africa remains rigged with conflicts, making the aspiration of sustainable peace a mirage. At the same time, all these conflicts are leaving women and girls as victims. So, welcome to this gender pre forum. And my name is Salah Hamad. I will be the moderator for the opening ceremony. In fact, I'm honored to be the only he for she in this session, and I will be introducing a very high VIP women who are taking the lead in promoting women rights and advocating for democracy, good governance, and rule of law in Africa. Let me begin this opening ceremony by inviting Her Excellency Miss Ahuna Isakuna Onchi, Assistant Secretary General of the UN and UNDP Director for Africa, to deliver her remarks. Madam Ahuna, you have the floor, please. Is Madam Ahuna present with us this afternoon?
Hello. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Auna is represented by Odette Kabaya in this event. I will, she convey her apologize because of the very last minute conflicting agenda. So with your permission, Mr. Chair, Your Excellency Minata Samate Sesuma, Commissioner for Political Affairs, Your Excellency Bineta Diop, AU Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, Your Excellency Hannah Tete, Special Representative of the Secretary General to the African Union, Excellencies, UN colleagues, distinguished guests, good morning, good afternoon. Allow me to convey the warm greetings and apologize from the Assistant Administrator and UNDP Regional Bureau for Africa Director, Mrs. Ahuna Eziakono, who would have appreciated to be with you today, but could not make it due to a very last minute conflicting schedule. I will therefore read the statement on her behalf. As I said, my name is Odette Kabaya. I'm the Regional Program Advisor and Team Leader, UNDP Regional Service Center in Africa, based in Addis Ababa. I open the court. It is my distinguished pleasure to join you today at this 9th annual high-level dialogue on democracy, human rights, and governance, gender pre-forum, being held under the theme, Silencing the Guns through Building Resilience. On behalf of UNDP, I would like to commend the African Union for creating this unique opportunity and providing an open and inclusive space for African women to engage in policy deliberations and amplify their contribution toward conflict prevention and building sustainable peace in the region. This forum is being held at a time when the AU theme of the year is on silencing the guns, creating conducive conditions for Africa's development. And as we are commemorating the 20th anniversary of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace and Security. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Gender equality, peace, and human rights are fundamental pillars for achieving sustainable development in Africa. This has been recognized by the African Union through the vision set out in Agenda 2063 and the United Nations 2030 Agenda. However, entrenched political, economic, and social inequalities and discriminatory norms are a major barrier to women's participation in governance and peace building, whether in formal peace processes, in post-conflict political institutions, or through civil society. It is therefore critical to combine support for institutional reform with a focus on strengthening women's socioeconomic position and political capacity and addressing discriminatory social norms. Women should therefore be placed at the center of Africa's peace and development agenda. We recognize and support the important role that women and girls play in the political leadership as well as economic governance, peace and security sector in Africa, and support them through various initiatives at national and regional levels. Their meaningful engagement is imperative in strengthening democratic governance, which is central to achieving peace and sustainable development in Africa. Women's rights are human rights. Supporting ratification, domestication, and implementation of key gender-responsive global and regional human rights instruments should be prioritized. We need to act with a common purpose, shared urgency, and with bold steps to translate and bring the promises from these instruments to women's lived reality. Through various interventions, we are strengthening the capacity of regional institutions and member states for women and girls to further enjoy their rights in a bid to bring the much needed transformation. Supporting women, broad-based collective action and voice is instrumental to their ability to negotiate transformative change, consistent to our commitment to supporting the implementation of the action plan on women in governance and political participation. UNDP recently launched the Building an Inclusive Post-COVID-19 Recovery, Crisis, Transitions, and Governance Reforms in the Sahel initiative. The initiative aims at supporting efforts to strengthen systems and structures that empower women in political transition, governance, peace and security, resilience and development. We therefore need to scale up and support more of such initiative across the region. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, investing in young women is a key driver for achieving Africa's sustainable development and peace agenda. It's critical to raise and empower a new generation of young African women, leaders, and experts to serve Africa and the world in designing and implementing development programs in the context of the SDGs and Agenda 2063. UNDP and AU launched the African Young Women Leadership Fellowship Program, and fellows are being deployed around the globe in various countries at regional and national and headquarters. We look forward to expanding this initiative and facilitate for greater inclusion and empowerment of young women to actively and meaningfully drive the full realization of Africa's Agenda 2063. The outbreak of COVID-19 has no doubt presented us with critical challenges, but also this is an opportunity to shape more equitable and inclusive development outcomes and accelerate the achievement of the SDGs in the decade for action. More importantly, place women leadership and experience at the heart of recovery efforts. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to reiterate UNDP commitment to supporting the African Union and member states in the realization of their commitment to sustaining women's role in conflict prevention and silencing the gang, through their leadership in governance, political participation, economic empowerment, peace and security agenda in Africa to contribute to the achievement of the sustainable the SDGs and Agenda 2063. We value the strong partnership and engagement on gender equality and women's empowerment with key AU departments, including the Department of Political Affairs, Office of Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, Women, Gender and Development Directorate, to name but a few, and also with other sister agencies such as UN Women, UNFPA, ECA, and others. We've premised on the understanding that women hold the key to sustainable peace, prosperity, and development of Africa. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Madam Odette Kabaya, for your statement on behalf of Madam Mahuna Aziakohuna, Assistant Secretary General, UNDP Director for Africa. We thank you so much for your words of wisdom. Since we are running out of time, let me quickly move on to the next speaker, and that will be Her Excellency Madame Hannah Tete, a Special Representative of the UN Secretary General to the African Union. Madame Tete, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon for this gender pre-forum. I think the discussion that we are having today and that will take place over the next 2 days is incredibly important because we have to be moving from aspiration to action. And I would like to congratulate my sisters, Commissioner Samate and also Madame Diop, for the efforts that they have been making in their roles within the African Union to make sure that gender is very much an important part of the dialogue and discussion on how we move the continent forward. I don't want to go into the details of all of the regional normative frameworks, protocols that have been established, both under the African governance architecture, under the African Governance Platform's Women's Engagement Strategy, under FemWise, the work that we've done together in respect of implementing the Security Council Resolution 1325, because I think that one of the things that will be evident over the next 2 days of this conversation is not that we are lacking in platforms or that we are lacking in vision. I think that where we have the challenge is of implementation. And so I think that the task ahead for us as the African Union and the United Nations, working together through our various offices, is how do we move all of these things from aspiration to action? What do we do so that in countries that are currently experiencing conflict, but are trying to work their ways out of it, we can create better opportunities for a combination of stakeholder parties to begin to push the agenda of women's inclusivity and not make it something that it's like has to be requested every time there is a discussion, but something that happens as a matter of course. And therefore, for the colleagues who are going to be involved in the deliberations over the next couple of days, I think that that's what I would like to emphasize for you. How do we move from aspiration to action? And it is even more urgent at the present time, because if any of you have paid attention to the recent release of the Mo Ibrahim Governance Index, you would see that for the first time since they started doing this compilation of the quality of governance on the continent and how it has improved, you will realize that as a matter of fact, we haven't made progress, we've retrogressed. And I think that given the fact that COVID has put significant both economic, political, and peace and security challenges at the forefront of most member states of the continent, we have to be asking ourselves the question, what do we do to ensure that women have an important role to play in governance, that we improve the quality of our institutions, that we make sure that we implement all of these frameworks at the national level, and that ultimately that it improves the quality of governance across the continent. And I have a few suggestions. I think that it is very important for the African Union, and the United Nations would very much like to work in support of the African Union, to also have its own means of evaluating the quality of governance on the continent. We have a number of external actors. We have, as I just mentioned earlier, the Ibrahim Governance Index. We have the Economist Intelligence Unit. It produces an assessment of the state of democracy across the world on an annual basis. We have IDEA, that is the Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, that also provides a similar assessment of the quality of democracies across the world, not just on the continent. But of course, because they look at this from a global situation, they also do an evaluation of Africa. And if you would have read the two most recent reports from these organizations, you would see that the state of democracy on our continent is not great. In fact, the only country that qualifies that is classified as a full democracy is Mauritius. Then the next group are considered to be flawed democracies. Then we have hybrids. Then we have a lot of autocracies. In those circumstances, the kind of democratic participation that we are talking about, that will give women a seat at the table, both in terms of politics, governance, and peace building, are obviously sorely lacking. But I would like Africa to be able to make this assessment for itself. I would like us to be able to put across what it is as per the frameworks that we have established for the continent, the African governance architecture, as well as the African peace and security architecture. What is it that we are expecting from our governments, and what do we want them to do? And as part of the criteria of effectiveness of governance, let's also include criteria on women and exactly how well women are able to participate in the governance process. Number two, let's have a couple of key projects where we are looking to support stakeholders at the national level in order to ensure greater inclusivity, because we need to move from aspiration to action. And I think that we would leave that at the discretion of the African Union to determine what are the countries that we should be focusing on in order to support the greater participation of women in politics and peace building. Now, having said that, I know that very often it's a bit of a difficult situation to raise funds or to get donors or to even get interested parties to support these kind of interventions when you're talking about politics. So I'm not talking about politics within the context of partisan politics, because indeed it is not appropriate for that to happen, but politics in terms of participation in governance. Because I believe one of the reasons why we're even having this dialogue is because we believe that there is something that is lacking that needs to be addressed. And I think that the reason why we've got to be able to do that is because if we are not actively measuring the participation of women in governance and holding countries to account, and also supporting to see how exactly we can build coalitions of stakeholders so that our sisters at the country level are able to have a greater voice and participation in developing the future of their countries, then really it's not very useful if we have a conversation among ourselves just to tell ourselves all about the frameworks that we have in place without actually asking ourselves, so what have we done to implement them? So a couple of key projects I think would be useful. And then finally, what I would also like to suggest is that in any ongoing peace building situation, whether the African Union is an active part of that process or not, I'm talking about what's happening on the African continent, there is always a constituency for the AU to support women's participation. Earlier this year, with my sisters, Madame Samate and also Madame Diop, we published a book, She Stands for Peace. And we looked at the anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. And we told the stories of African women and African women's organizations that had been involved in peace building processes. For me, it was quite an enlightening exercise because even though I had known about some of these women, I didn't know about all of them. But the range of work that they were doing was incredible. And it just told me that we haven't paid enough attention to telling our women's stories. We have to do more of that. But we also have to give women a seat at the table, because as part of this publication, I got to realize the difficulties that women were having in participating in the peace process in Libya. Now, I don't think that any of us who are on this call at the moment believe that peace building is an activity that is uniquely designed for the participation of men only. Indeed, part of the reason why we're having this discussion is because we believe that women have to have a seat at the table as well. And so for that reason, I think that regardless of the situation, whenever we find ourselves in a place where we are not having enough participation of women, or where the AU recognizes, albeit in a UN-led process, that women have not been able to be actively engaged as the preeminent regional organization on the continent, you have the opportunity to make the case, and you have the opportunity to support the participation of women in these activities. And my office would be more than happy to help you. So if I can conclude, I think that the most important thing that should come out of this discussion is that we should be moving from aspiration to action. We should be moving from having discussions of this nature to actively having more detailed discussions about how we actually plan regional and country interventions. We should look at the countries that need the greatest support in order to have the inclusion of women, the strengthening of institutions, the development of our democracies that is going to make our continent the prosperous continent that we all hope it will be under Agenda 2063. And that we also begin to commit ourselves to moving from aspiration to action so that we can create the Africa that we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Madam Hannah Teti, especially representative of the UN Secretary General, for your words of wisdom. And now let me move immediately to Her Excellency, Madam Beneta Diop, the African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security. Madam Special Envoy, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah Ahmed, our he for she. Let me also recognize my sister, Excellency Ambassador Minata Samate Sisuma, the African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs, and also Her Excellency Anna Tete, the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General to the African Union. Also, my sister Auna Ezeakonba, the UNDP Assistant Administrator and Regional Director for Africa, represented by Odette Kabaya. And Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I will say that I stand on the existing protocol. Let me thank Madam Commissioner for inviting us, but also associating my office in organizing this important forum in prelude to the 2020 high-level dialogue on democracy, human rights, and governance. You know, I wish to commend the AGA Secretariat for facilitating this discourse and the high-level dialogue series over the past few years I have been attending in many of these dialogue. I think this platform is very important, and it has become a valuable space for us because we examine what we have undertaken, reflect on past approaches and new opportunities and moving forward. And looking in gender issues and gender length, wearing our lens on issues of democracy, human rights and governance, and how do we make sure that women leadership prevail in those processes. And I think that today we are doing it in a different format, but still we are here standing to make sure that the voice of the women have been heard in those fairs. So I think as we engage in our discussion today and amplifying the women's role in conflict prevention and in particular silencing the gun, we need to remind ourselves that, conflict is often very gendered. Men and women experience conflict differently. As it was said before by Madam Anatete, the men are at the table and the women are being left behind. So the absence of women in those circles, I think it's either it is at the table, but also in the settlements, and making sure that they are in post-conflict reconstruction. So we need to mobilize. We mobilize at grassroots, and I think the women are mobilizing at that level, but also at the global level. We need to recognize the UN Resolution 1325, which is one of the key instruments that reaffirm after these 2 decades that the important role women play in preventing conflict and sustaining peace. Women have been there. Either we name it track 1, track 2, or track 3, they have been the one in promoting peace that even in informal system. In many communities in conflict, women have had the courage to come together. I have witnessed it in the Manu River region. They will be the one breaking the barriers and striving to heal wounds. We have seen it in the Great Lakes region, in Rwanda, and many other places. In many instances, grassroots advocacy has been instrumental in building relationship and finding mutual understanding. A conversation that looks at the horizon must explore the institutional framework as well as explore critical but often ignored structures. I'm not going to remind ourselves, I think it has been done during this commemoration of 1325, the women that have been displaced and forced to migrate and their situation as refugee and displaced people. We know also the situation of women in the peacekeeping forces and the issues of sexual abuse and exploitation. So those are, impact that are affecting women in conflict zone. So this situation forced women to organize themselves to safeguard basic necessities for the livelihood of their community. We have seen it, and I have been in the field on those missions, meeting refugees, displaced, but also with the sister, Madam Sesuma, to look into how do we, support them, themselves that are at the forefront of, for example, education and healthcare of their community. As we magnify, recognize, and applaud today, we need to remember that this situation should not be the norm, and these women often do all their work in extremely difficult contexts. So we need to get together and support them. Ambassador Salah, I was with you in one of those areas in Gambela, meeting with the young boys that have been displaced. We know that they are the ones that are reconstructing, they are the ones that are discussing, they are the ones that wanted to go back in South Sudan, and they are the ones that we need to support to go back and restore peace and the dignity of their community. So we know that we are far from our target. We need to accelerate action to ensure not only that women leadership in peace process is fully recognized and acted upon, but that our action are part and parcel of the agenda, the 2063, that is transforming Africa into a peaceful and inclusive continent. I think in this perspective, the UN and the African Union Commission have joined hands in supporting the an African-wide women movement to catalyze the leadership of women through the African Women Leaders Network. While we are talking, we have 25 national chapters, and we need to applaud the efforts of those women on the ground that are doing the work. I can quote, for example, in Mali, in Zimbabwe, and other places, joining hand with the youth, the young, to make sure that they address the issues that we are talking about today: governance, peace and security, but also the financial inclusion of women in all sectors. So I wish also to take the opportunity to salute and congratulate Commissioner Samate and Auna. Both UNDP and AU have launched a project to support women in governance and political participation. I think this is a great move, as also the fact that they're deploying young women and in our different organizations. We need to salute those efforts. Coupled with the undertaking of the Pan-African Network of Women Mediators, FemWise, we have seen also the work of they're doing at the table to make sure that women are part and parcel. We need to salute those efforts. I think the combined efforts of all of us, and has been said by Madam Anatete, that also we need to amplify the voice and leadership and the book that have been published, and we need to do more to show the face that women are there and they play a critical role, but they need to be recognized. And so no longer they will say, where are the face of the women? They are there and they're doing great work. What we need is to support them and make sure that they are in the circle of power. And civil society as well. We are playing a critical role most of the time, and their work are sometimes undervalued. It has been testified during this anniversary of 2025. So we need also to provide them with our political support, technical and financial as well. And as you know, we need to throw our political weight and influence into action that protect women's group, and in particular, women human rights defenders, and ensure that their security is not threatened while they are participating in peace and political process. So our he for she, I look forward to our interaction over the next 2 days, sharing our experience. There are a lot of experience. Maybe we don't know about them because we are not in the field, but we need to be more with them. We're going to exchange the knowledge and highlight our areas for support on the road to building better. We know that we are in the time of COVID, and the post-COVID recovery need that we scale up our action. So I think time is for action. And I do anticipate that our deliberation today will bring out solution and partnership to scale up action for peace in Africa. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Excellency, Madame Bineta Diop, African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, for your words of wisdom. And indeed, this platform, this forum is a platform for open and inclusive dialogue on how women could be part of this process of advancing peace and security on the continent. So women certainly have a role to play, and they must claim that role to play. Now I have the honor to request Her Excellency Ambassador Minata Samate Susuma, African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs, to deliver her welcoming remarks and to declare this forum officially open. Your Excellency, you have the floor, please.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la modératrice. Madame Bineta Diop, envoyée spéciale de l'Union africaine sur femmes, paix et sécurité. Madame Anna Tété, représentante spéciale du secrétaire général de l'ONU auprès de l'Union africaine. Madame Odette Kabaya, représentant Madame Aouna Eziakamo du PNUD. Mesdames et messieurs les membres du comité des représentants permanents, les représentants des organisations internationales, des partenaires, des organisations de la société civile, distingués participants, mesdames et messieurs. Permettez-moi pour entamer mon discours de souhaiter vraiment la bienvenue à chacun et à chacune à ce pré-forum sur le genre. Il s'agit du pré-forum qui prépare notre 9e dialogue de haut niveau. Comme vous le savez, mesdames et messieurs, l'architecture africaine de la gouvernance est une importante plateforme de dialogue entre différents acteurs qui ont pour mandat la promotion et surtout le renforcement de la démocratie, de la gouvernance démocratique et de la gouvernance d'une manière générale sur le continent africain. Comme je le disais, l'architecture africaine de la gouvernance a l'habitude d'organiser, et notre sœur Madame Diop l'a rappelé, nous organisons cela chaque année sur la démocratie, les droits de l'homme, la gouvernance et également le forum sur le genre et les jeunes. Cette année, cela s'inscrit dans le thème général que nous connaissons tous, qui consiste à faire taire les armes sur le continent africain. Comment nous pouvons créer les conditions pour le développement de notre continent. Ce pré-forum fait partie d'une série d'événements que nous organisons sous le leadership de Aga qui a son secrétariat au niveau de notre département et surtout en droite ligne de la stratégie engageant les femmes au niveau du continent africain. Cette année, il s'agit pour nous, durant ce pré-forum, de magnifier le rôle de la femme même en matière de prévention et surtout pour faire taire les armes sur le continent africain. Vous conviendrez avec moi, mesdames et messieurs, qu'il s'agit là d'une opportunité à travers cette plateforme, opportunité pour les États membres de notre Union, pour ceux qui font les lois sur le continent africain, les think tanks, les organisations de la société civile, nos importants partenaires, de joindre la main, comme on dit chez moi, un seul doigt ne peut pas ramasser la farine, c'est de nous mettre ensemble pour discuter de ces questions, sur les questions de gouvernance, comment nous pouvons contribuer à faire taire les armes sur le continent africain en impliquant particulièrement les femmes. Je parle d'impliquer particulièrement les femmes parce que lors des conflits violents qui sont encore source de déplacements forcés, de difficultés, ces violents conflits impactent malheureusement beaucoup plus les femmes. C'est vrai, tout le monde est concerné, mais les femmes et les enfants sont les plus concernés et cela nous empêche de réaliser les aspirations de notre agenda, l'agenda 2063 et également l'agenda 2030 des Nations Unies. L'impact est vraiment énorme et particulièrement lors même des discussions sur ces questions de conflit et la reconstruction post-conflit. Malheureusement, les femmes ne sont pas tellement consultées et elles ne participent pas à la prise de décision, même comme je le dis, elles sont les plus impactées par les conflits. C'est vous dire le rôle important que doivent jouer, le rôle que doivent jouer les femmes pour contribuer à la prévention des conflits en termes de partage d'expériences aussi et surtout être sur la table de négociation pour les solutions aussi qui les concernent. Mesdames et messieurs, nous devons, et je félicite les intervenantes, mes sœurs Anna, Tété, Madame Diop et également la représentante de Madame Aouna. Nous devons changer la narrative. Nous devons amplifier le rôle et la contribution des femmes dans la prévention des conflits. Nous devons aussi mettre l'accent sur le leadership des femmes, parce que si on a plus de femmes leaders dans ces processus, et également en matière de médiation et de gouvernance et de toutes les questions politiques et toutes les questions qui les concernent, on pourra aboutir à faire taire les armes sur le continent. Le continent reconnaît sur papier dans la plupart du cas le rôle des femmes, mais malheureusement, ce rôle n'est pas suffisamment magnifié. Beaucoup d'études montrent que nous ne pouvons pas avoir de paix durable si les femmes aussi ne font pas partie de ces processus. Je suis convaincue du rôle et de la capacité des femmes à prévenir la violence, à prévenir les conflits et nos dernières expériences. Je ne citerai pas de pays, nous les connaissons tous. Ce qui s'est passé ces derniers mois sur le continent africain nous démontre que les femmes ont cet important rôle à jouer pour aboutir à à faire baisser la tension et à prévenir le conflit sur le continent. Et on ne peut faire cela sans l'égalité. On parle d'égalité et malheureusement, cela ne voit effectivement pas le jour. Il y a des pays qui ont des systèmes de quotas, mais nous voulons que les femmes occupent effectivement leur place aux tables de négociation et également à la prise de décision, des décisions qui les concernent également. Nous devons promouvoir cette participation, ce leadership des femmes. Et on a récemment vu, pour illustrer cet exemple, on a récemment vu le rôle des femmes leaders dans les réponses face à la pandémie du coronavirus. On a remarqué que là où dans les pays où il y a des femmes qui sont les premiers responsables, ce sont ces pays qui heureusement ont pu contenir en tout cas et la propagation du coronavirus et à trouver des solutions à cette situation sanitaire sur le continent. Je vous citerai la Nouvelle-Zélande où c'est une femme, l'Allemagne, le Danemark et autres où ces femmes ont pu montrer l'exemple dans cette bataille contre le coronavirus. Nous avons besoin de plus d'inclusion des femmes dans toutes ces luttes et pour prévenir les conflits sur le continent africain. C'est vous dire que ce dialogue arrive à point nommé et Madame Diop a également rappelé l'important travail qui a été fait par notre département en collaboration avec le PNUD, avec Anna et d'autres partenaires bilatéraux et multilatéraux, on a pu élaborer, on a pu nous pencher sur les femmes dans la gouvernance et la participation politique sur le continent africain. Il s'agissait de mettre en œuvre un des piliers du réseau des femmes leaders qui fait un important travail, et ce pilier que nous avons sur la participation des femmes à la gouvernance, je ne dirais pas politique uniquement, à la gouvernance sur le continent africain. Nous avons pu discuter de beaucoup d'aspects, les barrières, ce qui empêche les femmes d'accéder à des postes de responsabilité, aussi bien dans le secteur public, de partager les expériences de certaines femmes leaders dans le domaine public et privé, et particulièrement en matière de paix et de sécurité, où elles ont quand même joué un grand rôle sur le continent. Je suis convaincu que le plan d'action qui a été adopté est un document important qui permettra, si ce plan est mis en œuvre, de trouver des solutions au niveau de nos États membres que nous avons encouragés à mettre en œuvre ce plan d'action, et surtout aussi en droite ligne des différents instruments que nous avons, le protocole de Maputo et également les différents protocoles au niveau des Nations Unies. Nous avons pu identifier 5 piliers. Comment renforcer la capacité et le leadership des femmes pour leur permettre justement de prévenir les conflits et être aux tables de négociation. Comment elles peuvent accéder au financement pour leur permettre de faire le travail, et comment aussi on peut engager ceux qui font les législations, les textes pour mettre en œuvre l'égalité au niveau du genre, et surtout le leadership des femmes, en évitant bien sûr naturellement la discrimination et cette perception négative que nous avons des femmes. Et nous avons aussi élaboré sur les violences. Malheureusement, les femmes continuent d'être victimes de violences et d'intimidation sur le continent africain, et particulièrement durant les périodes, les processus électoraux. C'est en mettant en œuvre ce plan d'action que nous contribuerons justement à magnifier ce rôle des femmes dans ces différents secteurs, qui incluent la prévention des conflits et leur inclusion dans les processus de paix. Je me félicite vraiment aussi, et Madame Diop ou Anna Tété ont également parlé de cela, la commémoration. Nous nous inscrivons justement dans le cadre de la commémoration des 25 ans après Beijing, la déclaration et la plateforme de Beijing. Si nous travaillons à mettre en œuvre, nous pouvons arriver justement à atteindre les objectifs que nous nous sommes fixés concernant le leadership des femmes, la participation des femmes aux questions de gouvernance. Je voudrais saisir cette occasion pour saluer tous les acteurs, les partenaires, et également les membres de AGA avec le secrétariat, mes collaborateurs, et surtout tous ceux qui d'une manière ou d'une autre nous assistent pour nous permettre de travailler sur ces questions, et également leur contribution aussi qui nous permet d'avoir la réunion d'aujourd'hui. Je voudrais aussi saluer un grand homme qui fait beaucoup dans ce domaine, c'est le président Moussa Faki Mahamat, pour son leadership en supportant les femmes, et surtout en encourageant le leadership des femmes, et surtout comment trouver des solutions aux défis liés aux questions de gouvernance, sans oublier le département même dédié à cela, le département qui s'occupe des questions de genre. Je voudrais, pour terminer, vraiment vous souhaiter la bienvenue à cet important forum, et surtout souhaiter de fructueuses délibérations sur cette question de la dimension du genre sur les questions de prévention des conflits et surtout comment, ensemble avec nos recommandations que nous allons partager avec les États membres, comment nous pouvons justement contribuer à faire taire les armes sur le continent africain. Sur ce, je déclare ouvert le pré-forum de ce matin et je vous remercie pour votre patience et surtout votre attention. C'est vrai, tout le monde n'est pas à Addis Abeba, c'est l'après-midi et dans certains pays où nous avons des participants, c'est encore la matinée ou l'après-midi. Merci à toutes et à tous. Je passe la parole au modérateur ou à la modératrice. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Commissaire. And we thank you so much for your statement and for declaring this forum officially open. We're running out of time, unfortunately, so we're going to move to the next session without any further delay. And we thank our members of the opening ceremony, the representative of Her Excellency Huna Izyakuna, Assistant Secretary General UNDP, Madam Her Excellency Madam Hannah Teti, Special Representative of UN Secretary General to the African Union, and Her Excellency Madam Bineta Diop, African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, and our own Commissioner, Her Excellency Ambassador Minata Samati Susuma, African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs. Now I'd like to kindly request the founder and chief executive of the Rosaria Memorial Trust to take the floor. She will be moderating the next keynote discussion. Unfortunately, the original time allocated for this session was 45 minutes. I hope the moderator will be able to get this session done within 30 minutes. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for introducing me. It's such a great honor for me to moderate this keynote session. And let me start by recognizing Your Excellency, Madam Minata Samati Sesuma. When we met 18 months ago, and someplace in this world, my heart was at pain, and I was sharing a personal circumstance with you. We showed the intersection between governance, human rights, peace and security. And I just want to say thank you so much for the extraordinary support that you continue to provide to me. Madam Binta Diop, my sister, thank you so much for your leadership, for being available, but really for ensuring that the issues of women, peace and security have been high on the agenda during this year, on the theme of the African Union. And I recognize all my colleagues from the African Union, as I also serve as the AU Goodwill Ambassador on ending child marriage and definitely silencing the guns. And women, peace and security enables us to end child marriage. Your Excellency, my sister Hannah Tete, we met in the Aulin meeting and you were very clear around the African story, including the intergenerational approaches and the mentorship. And I hear you today talking about the book. So I'm also inspired and would like to hear more about that book and to get my own autographed copy. In this session, and I want to recognize all the participants, UN colleagues, representatives from UNDP, Odette Kabaya, my sister, thank you so much, and to recognize all the participants. In this session, which is a keynote session, we are having a discussion and a lead conversation around the state of play of women in conflict prevention, trends and challenges and opportunities. Definitely the normative framework is important, but we also believe that the stories of the experience of the amazing two leaders on the continent that are in this discussion with me is very, very important. So in this session, we are going to have two panelists, amazing leaders. We have already listened to Madam Binta Diop, who will continue with her in conversation. As you know, she's the African Union envoy on women, peace and security. She's more than that. She's the founder of Femme Afrique Solidarity and was in that space when we had our solemn declaration on gender equality, when we had the plenary session and the issues of women, peace and security were there, the founding of GMAC, and we now have Aulin. She's received many accolades and many recognitions. Thank you so much, Madam Diop, for who you are and the leadership that you continue to provide. I'm also joined by a very dear sister I've known for many years, high respect, Ambassador Liberata Mula, a career diplomat from Tanzania, habari zako, my sister, a scholar who is currently a visiting fellow in the US at Georgetown University, and a member of AULIN, a very strong combination of academia, diplomacy, and practice. And in this conversation, we're going to start with hearing from Ambassador Mula. Before I invite her to share and to reflect on some key points, I also want to say I come into this work with the pain of being born during the war. I understand what it means to hear the guns and the helicopters above your head. The pain of the war dropping you out of school. When I dropped out of school, I didn't drop out of school. It was the war that dropped me out of school for a number of years. So I'm very passionate and committed because the personal is political. But you also know that in Africa, it's not just about the current conflicts. It's also the unfinished business, and that we are still struggling on democracy and governance, building on coloniality and the legacies that we've lived with. So I also come with a very personal experience, which is the base within which I come into this discussion. As I invite Ambassador Mula, we have been given 30 minutes generously by the lead moderator. So we'll take 5 minutes each into a deep discussion. Then we'll have 10 minutes at least with the audience, the participants to share views. So Ambassador Mula, we've known each other during the negotiations of the International Conference of the Great Lakes region, and you became the first Secretary General of the International Conference of the Great Lakes, and it was an amazing experience for us. So 1 minute, I would like you to just reflect on being in the negotiations and being a woman leading such an intergovernmental mechanism to build peace in the region, and also share on opportunities and approaches for forging the new pathways for inclusion, for engagement and participation of women in conflict resolution. We also know that you are involved at the global level. So if you can also reflect with us, share with us, bring us some insights into this whole trend around feminist foreign policy. What does it mean? Because it's a governance architecture at the global level, which is ushering a collaborative. So in addition to any other thoughts that you have as your keynote presentation, can you share with us and reflect with us on those key points? Over to you, Ambassador Mula.
Thank you very much, my sister Nyarazai. It's always a pleasure to see you, to see also sharing the platform even in these virtual times. Let me also not, of course, spend so much time in recognizing everyone here, but I really want to thank our distinguished sisters who opened up this forum for us with very high note statements and contributions. I would like to thank you, Excellencies, Ambassadors Samata, Madam Bineta Diupu, Madam Hanatete, as always, challenging us for action to move beyond aspirations. I was also very inspired to hear what, of course, UNDP is involved. We know UNDP, it is at the field level. That's so much, and especially also with our young women through this intergenerational leadership. Yeah, let me, of course, you have put me on the spot, what you have asked, but let me start by acknowledging that the choice of the theme for today's forum, meaning magnifying women's role in conflict prevention, silencing the guns, by implication, acknowledges the important role of women in achieving the African Union aspiration to silence the guns by 2020. I remember the first time I was talking to my students about the various African Union initiatives, including the Agenda 2063, I mentioned about this aspiration to silence the gun by 2020. Of course, one of the students was very courageous to remind me, says, Ambassador, did you say 2020? Because we are already in 2020. So I had the guns silent. So of course I had to explain. I said I said 2020, but then it is about creating conducive environment with the full participation of the women to ensure that we as women contribute to achieving sustainable peace and security, to deal with the issues that in the past we were seeing that these were issues of governments, were issues of armed groups. I participated, as you mentioned, in various peace negotiations. It's always lonely there. And of course, I found myself participating in the negotiations, peace negotiations from Rwanda, DRC, Burundi. So I found myself at the table, not by the right of being a woman, by the right of being there, but because of the portfolio I had no choice. But you could see that they all looked uncomfortable every time you'd raise your voice. So I'll come to explain about that. But I wouldn't want people to be discouraged, especially the young women, that being at the table doesn't mean anything. It means a lot. I know, of course, we don't have much time to address all the important issues about this aspiration. And I'm also happy that they have been well covered in the statements made by our dear sisters at the opening. But allow me just to highlight few and key areas which I believe would add accent or value to our conversation. First and foremost, I always like to quote this statement by the African Union chairperson who admitted that, and listen to this. He said in one of the occasions that it is only when we secure women who make up more than half of the continent's population that we can start to realize the Africa we want. And of course, also the famous quote of President Mandela when he was addressing South Africa's Women's Day in 1996. And he said, as long as a nation refuses to acknowledge the equal role of women of more than half of itself, it is doomed to failure. So that statement was true then, and it's very true today. So silencing the guns, as has been explained, is part of the bigger agenda 2063 of the Africa we want. So the question I put to all of you is, what do we want? We have been having many of these webinars, we have spoken on anything you could talk of. But then in summary, what do we want? What kind of Africa do we want? I know Mama Bineta Dupu will remind us, he said, we want to see Africa that is at peace by itself. But how does it get at peace by itself when more than half of the population is left out of this? And this is where I want to bring the context of our today's discussion, that the aspiration, of course, I said we have the aspirations. Mama Tete says we need to move from aspiration, but then it was the aspiration which I think we need to run with it. Aspiration number 6 of the Agenda 2063, which says that Africa will be at peace by itself, where women are empowered to play the rightful role in all spheres of life. Mark this. This is aspiration, but how do we move from here? First and foremost, let's all be on the same understanding when we talk of the silencing the guns. This has been said, but I want to emphasize. It's about prevention. It's about management. It's about resolution of conflicts in Africa. But given the multifaceted nature of the conflicts, it necessitates the utilization of more inclusive concept of people, which is about inclusivity. Women have an equal right to participate in our efforts to prevent and resolve conflict. Our meaningful participation is, of course, intended to challenge superficial efforts to include women without genuinely extending them the opportunity to influence outcomes. As in most cases, and this is where when I was participating in these processes, you are always put in a position of advisory role or an afterthought. And in mostly, you find that it is restricted to representative of states, governments, and most of these representatives are not women. I've seen it is restricted in these peace negotiations where I was involved, restricted to labor groups. Can you imagine the labor groups, they have the right to be at the table, but not the rest of us? Then it's restricted, of course, in the political transitions, political parties, of course, at the exclusion of the civil society. And of course, that's where also the women find they are being excluded. But also what I realized is that people do always use the reasons why women are excluded, the patriarchal, the culture, the traditions. Believe me, it's not so much about the culture, it's about power. It's about power. Because when you are in these peace negotiations, what takes most of the time is power sharing. It's about power sharing. But then we find that it's only those who have the courage to come forward with wanting to change the status quo. And we have seen, of course, women in Liberia demanding to change the status quo. And this is what we need to have, that courage to change the status quo. We have the African Women Leaders Network, which most of us, Aulin, which most of us are part of, which was launched in 2017, and thanks to, of course, to the joint efforts of the UN and the African Union and of course with the partnership with the Germans. This network, and this is what I said, let's take it seriously, because the aim was to bolster the leadership of women in governance, in peace and security for Africa's transformation, including participating actively in seeing that women play a meaningful role in silencing the guns through advocacy and sensitization of communities and policymakers. This was the statement in 2017. Today we are in 2020. How did we give substance? How did we make this actionable? Because we also adopted the document on call for action. What have we done? I'm now back in Tanzania. Have been trying to energize this objective by getting the women, of course, and all stakeholders, that issues of peace and security have to be a priority, even when the country is not at war. It's not easy. And this is where at one of our sessions, we say we need to invest much to change the mindset, not only for the men, but also for the women. I find I'm really struggling to get our Tanzania women to see that this is a matter of priority. They still see that it is, you're putting so much effort, but then why? Because we have never had a genocide, we have never had a war. So this is my struggle, to get my fellow women to understand that we need to be in the forefront. Of course, it's good to be in the political, political positions, but then yes, but then you cannot be able to bring any transformation if at all issues of peace and security are just like afterthought. Let me also, of course, talk about the FEMWISE. Thanks, of course, to COVID. Already said there's a silver lining.
As you wind up.
Yes, I want to talk about the FEMWISE because I think also most of us, we are part of that.
Ambassador Mulamula is muted.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm back.
If you can summarize.
Yes. So I'm saying what the initiative that the FEMWISE, for example, has taken is to have a pool of trained women from various backgrounds. And so that we have a critical mass of skilled women when we are called upon, because every time when I was in this negotiation, they said, Ambassador Mulamula, you are saying women have to be there. Where are they? Who are qualified, who are trained? So I think this is another commendable initiative which I think from this forum, we need to see how we can continue, not as an event, but as a continuous process of training. And as it has been argued, peace building is not only a science, but is also an art, where imagination and creativity are an essential part of building processes. We have to do away with doing business as usual and come up with new innovative ways of engaging, participating, and influencing decision-making. We should stop, of course, whining. There's no need to invent the wheels. There's so much out there, but then through our advocacy to ensure that it is implemented. The focus, of course, finally I'm finishing, should be on proactive conflict prevention before conflicts escalate, rather than reactive conflict prevention that has occurred when there has always been the case. So let me end here, because as I said, when I get into this issue, I don't know where to end. I know where to start, I know where to end, but I just wanted to highlight these key areas that we need to focus on, and so that we have a dialogue along those issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We need more women in diplomacy. And it was because you were a woman, female ambassador. That's why we also had the woman on that table. Say yes. It was also because we had women in diplomacy. So we need more women in diplomacy as a strategy, and your recommendation that we should not shy away from the conversation around power.
Yes.
I want to link your comments around governance and elections with the Madam Sesuma's comment around elections. I would really want to know whether we have approaches around more women being in election observation, just like we have more women in FemWise for mediation now. Are we also having more women in election observation as a strategy around a governance and building of our systems for prevention, for conflict prevention? Madam Binta Diop, I want to come to you, building on the work that you do as the AU Special Envoy on women, peace and security. What have you seen and what are you experiencing is some of the critical mechanisms that we need to put in place to magnify women's role? And what is holding back the implementation? I also want to celebrate you and say, definitely women have been on their feet, but there is much more that we need to be done. So what is holding back that which needs to be done? And if you can also share some concrete examples, as we know that at the moment in Africa, we still are having many issues that needs to be resolved. And I know that many people are talking about what is happening in Ethiopia. We still have to talk about DRC. We talk about Mali, different countries. So if you can share with us your perspective. Over to you, Madam Diop.
Thank you, Madam Goodwill, Ambassador Narazai, my sister, and the work that you do for women at all levels, but in particular grassroots level. I know that you like to say I'm at a rural women, and I'm sure that you are there taking care of your communities. But Ambassador Mula, who, I'm just going to maybe follow her step, because that's, as she said, that she has been in the many peace negotiation in the Burundi, where I met her during Malimu. And we need more women in that caliber in peace negotiation to open doors for women. So let me just quickly, very quickly, because as I think we have a lot have been said. When I took my mandate at the AU, coming from the peace activist background, of course, we realized that even though 1325 is born in Africa, as we say it in Namibia, but as an instrument, we really need to make sure that our member states take that instrument, the leadership, but also ownership. They own it as an instrument. So there was only countries that were in war that considered that 1325 was important. So the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. And we need to continue to do that, because that's when I started, we pushed. There was the Manu River region, there was the Great Lakes region, who had national action plan. There was not many. So my mandate was to also advocate for more ownership and leadership of 1325, which will become a women's agenda. Of course, it's embedded in the Maputo Protocol and the Solemn Declaration, our own global. But you think global, but you need to bring it down. Maybe we need to analyze, that time that it was taken by Security Council, which is far from, where we were sitting, but it's an African instrument. We cannot, what is taking globally, apply also locally. So right now we have 13 national action plan. Thanks to the advocacy work done by all of us, not just my office, but we push UN Women, all the agency, but the women's group on the ground, because this is a women's instrument. So now we have that ownership and leadership. Second, as it was mentioned, we need to, if you don't count, you don't exist. We need to make sure that when we talk about those pillars participation, what those who have adopted national action plan, how do they measure what kind of accountability they have put in place mechanism to make sure that we measure it. So my second was to engage with the Peace and Security Council of the AU, and we make sure that we adopt a continental result-based framework that is going to help on the next generation of action plan to have those kind of indicators, not just on the 4 pillars, but looking into beyond the 4 pillars. For example, the COVID-19, the crisis that climate change and others. So we need to quantify, and we need to measure, and we need to report. Right now we are at the second report of the chairperson. The chairperson of the African Union, Musa Faki Mohammed, had last year the first report for the continent, and we are the only continent that have published a report, which is coming from member state. It's not perfect, but we need to, reinforce it. We need to strengthen it. We need to say, so that accountability, because we say action, action, but for action, you need to go and measure the progress. But to measure the progress, it means that from the planning, from the beginning until the implementation, you have the right indicators. And we put in place at national level the mechanism that is following that implementation, including civil society, defense forces, the parliament, because you need also that it goes to the parliament, and the budget that accompanying it. So from the policy, you go to the implementation stage. So now, the last, maybe my last comment is just to allow people to ask questions, is to organize the women's themselves, the peace builders. When we go on solidarity mission, we are looking at how, for example, UNDP or our partners, or even the women themselves that are engaged in this process, how do we reinforce their capacity? What kind of resources? So our solidarity mission is to galvanize those movements, and you have named many of them. You talk about the women mediators, like the network of FemWise, or the network of women that are human rights activists, but also the women leaders. How do you make sure that they are part and parcel of the process in those 4 pillars? So supporting that movement is quite important, but also their protection by making sure that national level there are the laws, because when you have the national plan of action, you have also to go beyond it and make sure that you have those action plan implemented. I stop here because I think that we need more conversation around it. We know we need to maybe look at why at the table, what kind of mechanism we need to put in place that women can be at the table, starting being a governance mechanism, and that's where peace and security are linked to governance, and we need to recognize it, and leadership of women. If, as you said, Ambassador Mula was there in the Nyerere Foundation, and making sure that the women of Burundi, they open door and they can sit at the table. So you start by making sure that in governance mechanism, women are there in all sectors, and not just even at grassroots. You know, you are sitting in the baobab tree, sitting there, but you need to lead to make sure that those around you, you bring your contribution. So at every level, leadership is important. So we can reach out at the table without being an observer, without being, but being there because you have the right, being there, but because you are already leading. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am reminded of time. I want to just channel some of the questions and comments that have come through. A clear message from our sister from Gabon, that let's also continue to look at Gabon and the support that is needed to women in Gabon. Clear information that has come from South Sudan, and also the need for us to support women who are in decision-making or who are on the peace table. I think we heard Ambassador Mula saying it felt lonely at times. So how do we go beyond the numbers in order to enable the women on the table to deliver on their mandate, in addition to advancing the gender equality discussion there? I think the last is, how do we ensure protection? We also know that it's very sensitive to be in the negotiations for women at community level and in the countries. It's easier to push the advocacy, but for the people on the front line, they need protection. And I've experienced it also in the work that I've done with women when we were with these Darfur women and going to the various peace talks, and the women who dare to be on the front line need protection, need security. But we know that usually the security is to the other parties and not to these women. They feel very vulnerable. So you have less women participating. These are some of the points and key issues that have come out of the discussion, that we should not forget certain countries. Issues might no longer be in the media, but it doesn't mean that there are not issues that needs to be addressed. We're still looking into our neighbor Mozambique and the statement from SADC, the support that is needed. So those are some of the reflections that have come out in the discussions. I want to just give you 2 minutes to share with us your closing statement. I know that the moderator, the lead moderator, is reminding us that we are way behind time. So I would like to start with you, Madam Binta Diop. Any last reflections on the points that have come? But also my own direct question to you is, what keeps you going? What you amaze us? What drives you to stand up every day and do this? I'm just, yeah, you surprise us with the inner resilience and the inner drive. Over to you, Madam Diop. You are muted. Can you unmute? Madam Diop, can you unmute?
Thank you so much. I think it's really part of my DNA. It's something that is in me. The issue of women, peace and security is in my heart. And I think that the various countries that I've been visiting during the last, as we'll say that, 40 years of my life. So it means that majority of my life, my years, I have been in those zones, and solidarity is important as African women. It's part of us, from family to wherever we are. And we need to continue to be in solidarity to one another. So I think that's what motivates me. You talk about Gabon, and I'm very glad to say that Gabon is going to launch their National Africa Women Leaders Network national chapters. And through that chapter, we need to continue to support. As I said, there are 25 now platforms, but those platforms need to be, as Ambassador Mula make sure that they function and they are proactive. And as in Mali, it was the Aulin in Mali that started to mobilize the other network to say that we wanted to be part of this process. And it brings us to the issue of elections that, as you have mentioned. And yeah, I think also Ambassador Minata have alluded to that we need to mobilize women to be there, not partisan, but a group that can mobilize number to say that, you know, trying to mediate the conflict that is around elections, but also pushing for women leadership in the governance in the election. So I think this is where the next initial solution that we are looking at with the UNDP and the commissioner is to make sure that we have the system, the support system that will make sure that the women are at the table in elections, not just solving the problems or mediating, but being in the electoral process, understanding elections, you know, being in the electoral commission, being in the legal, being in the civil society, being all the structure need to be dismantled, and we make sure that women are there, but also supporting women candidates as well. So I think we have countries coming in, and we need to support them, like Central African Republic, where women have the courage to say, I want to be president, or I wanted to challenge, I want to be parliamentarian, I want to, especially the young people. So we need to support them. This movement is about solidarity, and coming back to the issue of solidarity, and solidarity is about you. It's your face, Narazai, knowing what you have done with the many groups in Africa, but in the global world, I have seen you in Pacific Island, in many countries, supporting women's movement. So solidarity is with us, including Madame Liberata, who is now even educating and training on the Africa. So we should be proud of what we have as well. You know, we need to be proud what Africa have done. We need to be proud. We know that we have still challenges, but we need to make sure that those challenges, we address them ourselves here, with the support of others, of course, but we need to make sure that we address them ourselves. Solidarity among us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Binta Diop, the African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security. Ambassador Mulamula, in Africa, we always say the sixth region of Africa is the diaspora. And the diaspora includes the US. And what would be your advice to the incoming government and our sisters in the sixth region? I know they are celebrating Harris as the woman first vice president, but in Africa we've had women presidents, so many women vice presidents. And what would be your advice around feminist policy and what we've learned as African women, which the world needs to know and the incoming administration needs to know? Sorry to put you on the spot, but the world, as it defines the feminist global policy, needs to learn from Africa on women, peace and security. What is your advice? Sorry to put you on the spot, but definitely.
Yeah, thank you,
right
Nyanazai. I know you always put me on the spot, but then I'm glad you have acknowledged the role of the diaspora. And of course, African Union having recognized that their diaspora is the sixth department. This is what we use as a platform when I'm in the diaspora to tell the world that the diaspora in the African context is different from what others understand about the diaspora who have run away. I was saying we have the best of the two worlds. Now, of course, what is going on in the US, hoping they will get out of this mess so that we can be able to do what we are good at. But then I always tell my colleagues, I said, you are the linchpin, whether it is you are in the US, whatever happens in the US, of course, would have impact on the rest of the world. But also, on the other hand, what happens in Africa has influence and affects whatever happens in international affairs. So I said we cannot sit and say we have no role. We have, at least we are the bridge. And I've been specifically in the diaspora, we have been on this issue of Cameroon, the crisis in Cameroon, which is not even spoken mostly in the African Union context, but then the diaspora have really taken the problem of Cameroon to find, I would say nobody would ever find solution for you. It is the key to finding a resolution, getting to put an end of what is happening in Cameroon lies with you in the diaspora. And you are in the comfort of the US, but then if, as Madam Diop was saying, if you cannot be linking whatever efforts you're doing with the local actors, then it will be fruitless. With the new administration, I know, of course, during the Obama time when I was there, the diaspora was really at the top. We were called, the diaspora were all involved in the shaping the foreign policy, the shaping the economic policy, shaping the business one there. With the new incoming, if at all I said they come in, I think the work is already done. There's so much to do in the field of peace, security, and prevention, conflict resolution and management, that if we are well positioned, we can really influence the policies, the direction of the new administration. But I was saying, if we sit by and lament, of course, the social media and what, that won't help us. But use that strategic bridge between countries of origin and the US to be able to influence the policy of the new administration. So this is what my message to my diaspora colleagues.
Thank you. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that point. Would immediately make a direct request to our Commissioner for Political Affairs, that is the African Union engages with the new administration January, February, when they are officially inaugurated. As African women, we also want to engage with the US. We want to put our issues directly on the table. As women, we want to build into these relationships that exist. So thank you so much. It has been such an honor and such a pleasure to moderate this session, to have such amazing panelists and an amazing audience, great questions. Ambassador Salah Hamad, I want to come back to you to hand over your session. When we silence the guns in Africa, Africa prospers. When we silence the guns with women, Africa's peace becomes sustainable. It will not be transient. Thank you so much. And I want to appreciate everybody. Back and over to you, Ambassador Salah Hamad, as I also say thank you as your AU Goodwill Ambassador on Ending Child Marriage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Madam Ambassador and moderator, for an excellent moderation. We thank you, and also we thank through you members of your panel, Ambassador Mola, and Her Excellency Madame Beneta Diop, the Special AU Envoy on Peace, on Women, Peace and Security. Now it is time for an interlude. We have a video of 2 minutes, so we'd like to direct your attention to the screen to watch together this video, colleagues. Thank you very much, colleagues, for this nice work. It is time now, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, to move to the next session. It's a moderated panel discussion that will be on normative and institutional frameworks on women and conflict prevention. And it will be moderated by Dr. Tony Hastrup, researcher on women, peace and security, gender equality advocate and speaker. And she will be introducing her members of the panel. The original time allocated for this session was 45 minutes. So would like to request the moderator to end it within half an hour, and we will be really happy to see the session, despite the importance of it, of course, ending within half an hour, unfortunately, because of the limited time we have. Madam Moderator, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's my pleasure to be here today, and we will try to keep to time this morning. Just to note that people should please include your questions in the Q&A box. I'm Tony Hastrup, and standing on existing protocols, I'm really pleased to be here this morning, but I'm even more excited to introduce our two speakers, Madam Victoria Maluka and Ms. Samiha Abdul Malik. And I will start by introducing Madam Maluka. Madam Maluka is a lawyer and currently the acting director of the Women, Gender and Development Directorate within the African Union Commission. And she has years and years of experience working in civil society within international institutions, including the UN, as well as national institutions. More recently, Madam Maluka has been the co-editor of the National Human Rights Institutions in Africa. And so here today, Madam Maluka brings a lot of experience. And in preparing for this session, I had a question to pose to Madam Maluka to sort of start us off on our discussion. The question has to do, of course, with the theme of this session around the normative and institutional frameworks available. And my question to Madam Maluka is, how can African women leverage the relevant policy instruments, normative frameworks, regulations, particularly those aimed at conflict prevention, and in particular to silence the gun? So how exactly can the women on the continent leverage this policy frameworks? Thank you, Madam Maluka.
All righty, thank you so very much, Dr. Tony, our moderator. And really in the interest of time, I will stand on established protocols. Suffice to really congratulate the Department of Political Affairs under the leadership of Her Excellency Commissioner Solemn Samate for convening this gender pre-forum, and also to really express appreciation for the opportunity to share the perspectives of the Women, Gender and Development Directorate. Dr. Tony, just allow me a few minutes to anchor my response by highlighting just a few, not all, just a few normative and institutional frameworks on women, peace and security that we have, just to be able to put things into perspective. We all know, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, that Africa is really endowed with the best and some of the most comprehensive body of normative and institutional frameworks to empower women and ensure their security. We have, of course, our own Bill of Rights, the African Women Bill of Rights, in the name of Maputo Protocol on Women's Rights, which really anchors the women, peace and security agenda within a human rights framework by specifically providing for the right of women to peace and for their protection during armed conflict. And we recently developed the Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index, which is an innovative monitoring and evaluation tool that will help us to track implementation of member states' obligations. And really, this is one of those tools that women can use to check how far member states are doing in ensuring that their rights are protected. We also have the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa. This is an accountability mechanism where member states are required to submit annual reports to the AU Assembly detailing how they have implemented the gender equality obligations, including on women, peace and security. And we, the Gender Directorate, again, are required to receive those reports and of course to report to the Assembly through our various policy organs. We also have the new African Union Gender Strategy, which is really a framework document to strengthen women's agency in Africa and ensure that women's voices are amplified and their concerns are fully addressed. The strategy also recognizes the dignity, security, and resilience, as well as women, peace and security, are really fundamental to the attainment of gender equality. And it also promotes women's participation in peace processes. Last but not least, the ACDEC. Of course, I cannot be on this platform and not mention ACDEC, which promotes women's rights to full and active participation in decision-making processes. The same is echoed in Agenda 2063, Aspiration 6. And really, I would not have done justice if I don't mention that, and this is really a reiteration of what Madame Diop has already mentioned, that Africa has 25 national action plans on UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and 6 regional action plans, which makes Africa the continent with the highest number of NEPs and RECs. And really, this is all thanks to the AUC leadership, including Madame Diop, for the commitment, the advocacy, and solidarity with African women and women peace builders. That has really been instrumental in making sure that we have all these NAPs and RAPs. Now, at the institutional level, Dr. Tony, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, of course, we have FemWise Africa Network, which was established as a mechanism, as an implementation mechanism for the AU to ensure that women participate fully and equally in all matters of peace and security. Since its operationalization about 3 years ago, the network has brought together nearly 500 women peace builders across the continent to not only support the AUC, but also to support the RECs and of course wherever the members of FEMWAS are deployed in member states. Now, to come to your answer directly, how can African women really leverage all these instruments and knowledge and frameworks for conflict prevention, and in particular, silencing the guns? Our approach, Dr. Tony, ladies and gentlemen, dear excellencies, has been to really build synergies through creating platforms so that women's voices are strengthened. Through these platforms, we carry the voices of women in a unified manner, so that when the voices are stronger and the leadership is enhanced, we are able to influence policy and bring to life these instruments. And by so doing, women also contribute to silencing the guns. We've established a number of platforms. I'll mention just one or two. The African Women Leaders Network. And there we have 2 pillars there. Commissioner Sisome has already focusing on women, peace and security, as well as governance and women's participation. We've recently convened the Africa Women, Peace and Security Forum. Excuse me, Madame Diop also mentioned this one. And really one of the recommendations, just to illustrate how these platforms allow women to influence policy and to bring life to this instrument. And one of the recommendations there was for the AUC to consider hosting a peace summit on for women that will be led by women, but of course at the heads of state level. So really through this, we are able to bring life to these policies under the leadership of women, by women, and of course for women. And we also conduct solidarity missions, and Madame Diop spoke quite a bit about this. Through the solidarity missions, we are able to amplify the voices of women on the ground, to understand their realities and scale up their voices. And because we are able to report directly to policy organs like the Peace and Security Council, which do not necessarily have the same kind of ability that we have to go to the ground. So we take the voices of women, we put them at the platform of the Peace and Security Council so that they're able to understand what women are going through, and then be able to take appropriate decisions. And really, I can just mention one solidarity mission in Sudan last year, immediately after the conclusion of the peace agreement, where women requested assistance, and we were able to go there, spend a number of days with them, and we're able to bring the women to directly themselves brief the Peace and Security Council of the AUC. As I conclude, FEMWAS, of course, continues to deploy its members to support the work of the AU in countries. Thus far, we have members in Sudan and South Sudan, and there'll be upcoming deployments in Mali, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Libya, and so forth. But finally, really, let me also just highlight that the declaration of this year as the Year of Silencing the Guns is also a critical implementation tool. As Ambassador Mulamula has already mentioned, it's really to galvanize all the support to ensure that everyone, including women, contribute in preventing peace, or rather in preventing conflicts, bringing peace, and making sure that women indeed lead. Really, thank you so much. And this is really in a nutshell, the AU normative and institutional frameworks on WPS and ways in which women access them, and how women can bring this to life and contribute to silencing the guns. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Maluka. That was a very insightful overview, and thank you for keeping it short. And it was quite fascinating to hear the ways in which some of the work you do acts as a sort of conduit for women's voices to those spaces that they are not able to access. And I'm sure that some of our participants here would love to hear more during the Q&A session. Now let me move over to our second speaker, Ms. Abdul Malik, who is an experienced practitioner in the fields of humanitarian and conflict programming with expertise in regional institutions. She has worked for a number of local and international NGOs. She's worked for the African Union Commission, as well as some of the other regional organizations. She holds a master's in human rights practice with a distinction from Gothenburg University in Sweden. My question to Ms. Abdul Malik is, what are the blind spots of regional and national institutions when it comes to engendering women's leadership, particularly women's leadership roles in peace and security? And how do you see, from your perspective as an outsider, how do you see the role of these institutions, both again at national and regional levels, facilitating women's participation within the peace and security governance structures? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tony, Excellencies, distinguished guests, fellow panelists, Madame Maluka. I'm very happy to be here to provide some reflections from both the national and regional perspective. So in the interest of time, I'll just try and quickly just go to some of my reflections based on the question the chair has raised. And for me, one first point is really that at a national level, in many countries across Africa, you either have existing or very nascent national peace infrastructures or architectures, as they're called. And I think one of the challenges currently that we see is that in terms of the conceptualization of these national peace infrastructures or architectures, as they are sometimes called, is to what extent our approaches to them is to just stir and mix gender, i.e. we speak about ensuring parity in terms of the commissioners or the leadership of these institutions or structures, etc. And I think we need to take a bit more cognizant of the need to focus a lot more on the design of these infrastructures and how they then lead to more inclusive spaces for women's leadership and participation, even beyond the issue of numbers. So I think the issue of design of these infrastructures, particularly where we have opportunities where they're just coming into play. I mean, there's an example of Nigeria, where currently there's a lot of momentum and support for the development of a national peace architecture, as well as at a state level. So I think there's a huge opportunity there to to not just think about how we include women, but also in a sense, think about the design of what we want these infrastructures to be in pursuit of conflict prevention. And also the opportunity really to be looking at the specificities of, and again, using the example of Nigeria, where you have different forms and magnitudes of conflict across the country, what is possible in one state or necessary may be very different elsewhere. So I think my first point really is about the challenge of the design of these infrastructures. So are we trying to get on the table, or are we trying to redraw the table? Think a bit more about redrawing the table and what that could mean in terms of outcomes for women and more inclusive outcomes for all groups. A second point really is the issue of how, particularly in the area of security discussions at a national level, how perhaps, for example, again, I'll use the example of Nigeria, which is currently undergoing a very significant moment around police reform. There's been a lot of discussion. There have been, as many of you may have been following, huge issues and challenges around police reform. And I think when such policy issues are being raised, I think there's a huge opportunity there to better explore the issue of women's leadership and participation, because these policy discussions really need to be engendered, and that's where then we see down the line issues of perhaps reform in a sense, in the ways we need to see. And then thirdly is really, I think, something we see quite often when you look at national level programming, is that when we're looking at issues of women, peace and security, often you have programming that sees violence against women, women's political participation, and then kind of women, peace and security in kind of siloed approaches. From a programming perspective. And I think that doesn't do justice to what we're trying to achieve when we're trying to look at silencing the guns, because the issue of silencing the guns is really an attempt to look more holistically about what that would mean in terms of positive peace for women, for girls, for all citizens. So I think really at a national level, the issue of integrated programming across these different areas, which in my mind all feed into silencing the guns and kind of a human security lens to silencing the guns, is incredibly important. My third point, and I think this has been raised by Madame Diop and others in the previous, is really how the NAPs and the LAPs, the local action plans at a country level, really have been the main vehicle for looking at the issue of women's participation in peace and security and governance. Now, one of the main challenges that we see at a national level, even though it's very encouraging that we have increasing numbers of NAPs and LAPs being developed, is that often there isn't sufficient broad institutional ownership, i.e. usually they're driven by the ministries of gender or women's affairs, and really the need to have broad ownership across the different ministries, departments and agencies that have various mandates around peace and security is really critical, and the role really of the ministries of women's affairs or gender, as it may be across the different countries in Africa, really should be the issue of coordination, reporting, and support. And of course, I think the issue of adequate financing has been raised. But also in terms of, and one critical area I think that a lot of institutions are now looking at is the issue, and again raised earlier, this issue of oversight and accountability. And at a national level, I think there's been a lot more momentum currently to look at the role of legislatures, especially specialized committees, committees of security, committees of budget affairs, committees overseeing women and gender issues. And this may differ across different countries across the continent. But I think the point really is, how do we ensure that these oversight bodies have a greater role in terms of not just financing, but also oversight in terms of the role of these different institutions that are overseeing programmatic or operational efforts, but also in terms of lawmaking. And then last, two additional points before I conclude, because I know we're running out of time. There've been a lot of, especially at the continental level, and I think Madame Maluka pointed to the number of various networks, etc., FemWise, as well as others that have been set up. And I think, again, at a national level, one of the challenges, both opportunity and challenge that we're seeing, is that you often have multiple networks organized at both national level, local level, somewhere in between. And some of the challenges around that is really about standardization, vetting, as well as ensuring linkages to formal peace-building institutions, which is something I think that needs to be looked at a bit more currently. And then lastly, I think, and it's to just touch on something I feel has been implicitly touched on, but by all previous speakers, but I think we need to take a little more seriously, is to what extent, and this points to the issue of the role of regional organizations, also national state institutions as well, is how do we start to bridge this local, national, formal, informal, state, non-state dichotomy into something that is more synergistic and ensures that this multi-levels of governance and engagement really work well together. So I think I will stop on this point, and I look forward to the discussions and questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abdul Malik. I think what is really interesting from what you shared with us is sort of that the importance of the national dimension to actually meeting any of the aspirations of the regional. And I think then the sort of point that you make at the end, you know, how do you bridge the local with the national, the regional, and indeed the global is a very pertinent one. But I also wanted to ask you and push you a bit on some of the interventions you made earlier, which was you talked about the need for thinking about the design of our institutions, and that is certainly something that I very much subscribe to. But I wondered, particularly given your experience on the Nigerian case, to what extent does the drive for sort of thinking about redesign, rethinking what the table is, to what extent does that square up then with the appetite for reform, which tends to reinforce the status quo, perhaps simply to do it better?
Thank you, Dr. Tony. I think that's a very good question, and I think it's if you speak to a lot of Nigeria has a very strong women's movement that has engaged on issues of electoral reform, constitutional reform, and a number of other key policy issues. And I think again, the issue of whether there is space for that kind of a shift from the status quo is a good one. But I think it's imperative that in addition to the women's movement, I think other actors on the ground, the UN, NGOs, those providing both technical and material support to both government and non-government, also have a very strong role to play in terms of the advice and the supports they're providing in terms of pushing along this reform agenda. Of course, member states are sovereign, but I think there's a lot of space that partners have to be able to influence and support greater reform, and that's not to say that this is an easy battle. I think a lot of what we're seeing on the ground, we've seen pushback on certain issues. So I think really it's about how do we all collectively push this agenda on the other side and see what we can achieve. But yes, definitely a challenge. But I think it's imperative for what we see on the ground, and I think others have spoken to it, is the strength of grassroots movements, the strength of local women's movements, and our role as the UN or as other external entities is really to be able to support that progressive agenda and see how we can engage constructively with member states and national institutions. So I think there's a big role there in terms of coherence and how we collectively push reform in support of the agenda that Nigerian women, African women have put on the table and have been working on for decades.
Thank you very much. And perhaps leaping off of that final point that you've made and going over back to Madam Maluka, one of the things I found very interesting and reflected in Ms. Abdul Malik's point as well is sort of that the mechanisms of accountability that exists and the ways in which various entities, departments at national level, but also departments and directorates at regional level try to ensure that women's voices are heard. But when we're thinking about accountability, there also has to be accountability coming the other way. How, what are the mechanisms for ensuring accountability back to those women who've, really basically put themselves on the line to make their voices heard for the sake of their countries, their regions, and their local communities. I just wondered if you could say a bit more about your own experiences of ensuring that those women know that their voices have been heard and what it is that they have suggested has actually been done, and perhaps some of the challenges in ensuring that happens as well. You're still muted.
My apologies. All right, thank you, Dr. Tony. In terms of accountability, one of the things that we do as the gender directorate, and I did mention the issue of reporting, making sure that the member states account to their citizens through reporting to the African Union Commission, and of course also through to the African Union, or rather African Commission on Human and People's Rights. I mentioned the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa, where we receive reports from different member states. We through those reports, we're able to see the extent to which member states are really sticking to their obligations under the SDG. We also know how they're doing, whether they're doing well, and whether there are other areas that needs improvement. The instrument that I just mentioned related to the Maputo Protocol, the Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index, it's also one, it's really what we consider to be one of the most innovative accountability tool that would allow us to go a step further. Once we receive a report on Maputo Protocol, we now apply the indicators in the Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index to now look at the report that a member state would have submitted. So it will not be sufficient anymore for the member state to just submit a report, but we'll be looking at that report and say, how truthful is this? What other areas can be improved? So that really we make women's rights very, very meaningful. And that way we're able to give back to the women, so that indeed they realize that, yes, their governments have done well, but then there may be other areas where they need to improve. So really that's what we are doing right now. And I also need to indicate that there is a very serious concern around inadequate reporting, and really this does deny citizens, and especially women, the opportunity to appreciate the extent to which member states are implementing the obligations under the various instruments. And hence we are applying some of these instruments, these tools that I have mentioned. We've also, as the Gender Directorate, developed an online reporting platform that we hopefully will help member states to report. Member states are really concerned about multiple reporting, because they're obliged to report to 1 million instruments, and it also means 1 million reports. But once they're able to report in one platform, it will make it very easy for them. And that way, we are also able to give that back to women. Women will be able to access that and see areas where they would need to have much more advocacy, where they need to push a lot more to make sure that their member states really comply with the obligations. Thank you, Dr. Tony.
Thank you very much. And perhaps I'm quite fascinated by the fact that, you know, you've provided this platform to facilitate both ease of reporting, but also to streamline it. And I think that that's a very important innovation in of itself, but one that also obviously maximizes the use of technologies. And I just wondered, because this is an issue that both yourself and Ms. Abdul Malik touched upon, the issue of siloing different issues, right? So far we've talked about the different ways in which these issues intersect. So in this particular context, we are talking about prevention, but very much an issue that also looks at women's participation as well. So I just wondered, as a fundamental challenge, the siloing of women, peace and security concerns, what are your impressions, or what would you advise as a way to sort of break down those silos so that we're just not in the gender directorate, women and gender directorate, or just in the Department of Women's Studies or some such. And I know that you'll have your views, but so will Ms. Abdul Malik, and I'll let you go first, Madam Maluka.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy about that question, and because already we have a position as the Gender Directorate. We say, for example, that the Gender Directorate in the African Union Commission is really there to promote gender mainstreaming, but that the actual mainstreaming itself, the integration of women's issues and women's concerns in the work of the union takes place in different departments where you have subject matter experts. So this is number one, how we try to break the silos to make sure that the Gender Directorate has footprints all across the Commission. I can assure you that this work with the Department of Political Affairs, somebody who sees the word gender forum would say, but why is the Department of Political Affairs hosting a gender forum? But this is gender mainstreaming at its best. So this is really one of those things that we do. We make sure that we mainstream, the footprints are across the AUC, but it's also, you know, in line with our own mandate. We are required to promote the integration of gender equality and women's perspectives across the African Union, in the African Union Commission, in the organs, in member states, and the recs. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Abdul Malik, final points.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I think, maybe just a quick example from, again, Nigeria in terms of how you can start to break down silos. Recently, we supported the launch of a gender security sector gender reference group, which is composed of all security sector institutions, oversight bodies, and it's co-chaired between the Ministry of Women's Affairs and then a designated or an elected member from one of the other security institutions. And I think it's a really good model of how you can bring the entity that's responsible for gender mainstreaming across all ministries, departments, and agencies at a national level, but also ensure that you have broader ownership of the agenda by all, by a thematic group of institutions, in this case, security sector institutions. So I think it's a new model, and I think the co-chairing and mixing it up really is an important model that we can see how to advance. A second one is that, for example, at a national level, we're supporting gender focal points in the various ministries, agencies, and departments. And we're bringing all those gender focal points together so that they get a better sense from the ministry. So they have so it's two-tier. One is to get all of them to have a general and standardized understanding of what their roles are, but also start to get discussions about what their specific needs and issues are within their thematic areas. So I think it's really these kind of cross-learning across the different institutions while having kind of specialized focal points within these institutions that can speak across each other that's incredibly important, and it's a model that we're trying to see how best we can support. But I think also looking at national action plans and how best they can be. A few countries are now on their second or third national action plan, and I think that gives us the opportunity to really address the issue of siloing of issues. And broader ownership by across national counterparts, and not just from the side of the executive, but civil society and legislatures as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our brilliant speakers, Madam Maluka, as well as Ms. Abdul Malik. It's very easy to keep on with this discussion, but I do want to end with some reflection from the Q&A, which is, and I think it's a conversation that will definitely resonate with the next session, which is around the ways in which women in Africa are perhaps not as appreciated as they can. And clearly from the presentations that we've heard so far today, women in Africa are an important resource. And this, the last two panels alone are evidence of this. I would like to thank the participants again for engaging with us, and I will pass over back to our chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tony, for a job well done. Excellent moderation indeed. Through you, we thank our dear sister Victoria Maluka and dear sister Samiha Abdul Malik for excellent presentations. I seek the indulgence of the participants, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that we are staying a bit longer than expected. And I thank the interpreters for allowing us to just extend the program by a little bit more, maybe about 15 more minutes. And the next session or the next part of this program is an interesting part, that is Africa Talks. This Africa Talks will be featuring Miss Ala Salah. She is the icon of the recent Sudan uprising and also an activist. So let's try to watch this video together before we conclude our day one of this fascinating and interesting forum. Colleagues, let's proceed, please. Thank you.
اوكي. مساء الخير، آلاء صلاح معانا من السودان. آلاء صلاح أيقونة الثورة السودانية من منظومة عمل الحكم الرشيد الأفريقي في الاتحاد الأفريقي بأديس أبابا فورم، وهو منتدى النوعي للنساء وخاصة يركز على أهلا وسهلا. نور هاجر، ومساء الخير على الحضور من مختلف مقامات ومنتمية. شاكرة جدا للاتحاد الأفريقي اللي تحته لي الفرصة دي عشان أكون جزء من حدث اليوم. سعيدة جدا 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 بأني حأكون معكم على مدار ال10 دقائق الجاية. أهلا وسهلا. ألا لو تسمحي لنا خلينا نرجع نستعيد اللحظة تاني، اللحظة وانت واقفة على السيارة وبتهتفي وبتلقي قصيدة حفظها ليك التاريخ. ممكن نسمعها مع بعض ونسمعها للمشاركين معانا في هذا الحوار عبر الإنترنت. جدا ما في مشكلة. القصيدة كانت هي واحدة من القصائد اللي كنا بنرددها في الثورة. كنا نقول مطلع منا تلقى مرتبط بيكتور سكات أكثر شعار يمكن هو قدر يوصل للعالم. هي قصيدة طويلة فحنقولها مع بعض. يا والدة أحيي في شلة الحكام شوهوا الإسلام، جايبين تفاهاتهم، حرقونا باسم الدين، قتلونا باسم الدين، سجنونا باسم الدين، حقرونا باسم الدين، والدين بريء يمه. الدين بريء يمه. الدين بيكون للظالم، إن شاف غلط منكر ما يمكن يسكت، يبقى الغلط في الدين. قوس السجن بيغرق في خيرنا ويتمتع، ونحن سقينا النيل من دمنا الفاير، ما بننكتم نسكت في وش عميل جاير، والخوف عدي مساس. وين جدتي الحاقة وحبوبتي كان داكا، عبد الفضيل الماس والراس نشيل الراس، يما الشباب بيحيوا وانا بس كنت ميت. هزاعوا سنهوري امجد ولي الدين، مازن منى ومجدين، ديل كلهم حيين لابسين حرير اخضر سندس ويستبرق، وانا دمي بتفرتك ساكت وبتفرج. وإن كان سجن يما سجنا يكوسوا رجال، سجنا ملان سوار ما قالوا كن سراب، من دس فيه خاين فيه الشريف ذمة، فيه الغباش دفاق، الضار لهيب الشمس بحرك هالرقراد. وإن كنت خايف الموت يوم الرجال أحرار، شين فايدة العيشة والروح مولع نار. الطلقة يوم الجواز بحقنا المظلوم، الطلقة يوم خلاص نزول خلاص مقتول، زي طعنة الشوكة واكسر كمان في الطول. الطلقة يوم حياة، الطلقة يوم ترن، دي كلمة سمحة وقول. قال المراد اليوم الطلقة ما بتحرق، تحرق سكات الزول، والطلقة ما بتقتل، يقتل سكات الزول، والطلقة ما بتقتل، يقتل سكات الزول.
شكرا يا آلاء، تسلمي، شكرا. خلينا نسألك ونستعيد اللحظة دي. ازاي يعني ماذا تعني لك هذه القصيدة؟ وانت كده كنت بتلقيها ليه؟ يعني ايه المشاعر اللي بتشعري بيها لما تتذكري هذا الموقف؟
القصيدة في معانيها وفي أبياتها قدرت توصل وتصور وتوصف في الواقع السوداني اللي كان معاش بالنسبة لنا في السنين اللي فاتت. كانت من القصائد القريبة لقلبي. يا والدة فكلماتها كانت قريبة جدا من قلوبنا، قدرنا نعيش. أنا واحدة من الناس عشت في كل جزء من القصيدة أنا كنت عايشاهم في حياتي. بداية من مطلع القصيدة يا والدة أحفيني وعدل قطعت معك أنت الكلام منطش اللي ده كان. أماتنا وأبائنا كانوا مصروفين علينا جدا من حكاية إننا نطلع للشارع للمواكب، لأنه كان في قمع ما طبيعي ممارس علينا. قسم سيل الدموع، رصاص، احتقالات تعسفية، وصلت إلى حد الاغتصاب في زنازين النظام السابق. فأهلنا بالتالي كانوا متخوفين. فبعد شهر ونص من إنه أهلي
امتى قررتي تطلعي على السيارة وتقومي تهتفي بهذه القصيدة؟ ايه اللي جه في بالك؟ ليه طلعتي على السيارة في هذه اللحظة تحديدا؟ احكي لنا عن اللحظة دي.
تمام، ذكرتي حاجات حلوة شديد. لحظة السيارة تحديدا هي كانت مرة من عشرات المرات أنا هتفت فيها في القيادة، بس اللي كان مختلف في الوقت ده. وأنا مرة على ميدان وأنا ماشية في الاعتصام يعني في الميدان، فلقيت جروب من البنات بيهتفوا وبيرددوا الشعارات، فوقفت معهم بكل الحماس وهتفوا ومع بعض كده كنا بنردد بنقول ثورة والشعارات بتاعتنا والقصائد بتاعتنا وكده. فبعد ما 4 بنات يتخلصوا قررت اوكي انا كمان عايزه اهتف يعني. فقالوا تمام يلا اهتفي احنا معاكي. فقلت لا بس انا عايزه اطلع في العربيه. فجات فكره اطلع في العربيه، فطلعت في العربيه ولحظه كانت حماسيه جدا صراحه. الشارع هو كان ماشي، فلما انا طلعتها الناس بدات تتوقف يعني، وبدت بكل حماس بتردد معي في الشعارات يعني. حتى كنا مثلا القصيده بتقول بيت والثوار معك بتقولوا ثوره، وعلى الايقاع ده بيخلص الهتافات بتاعتنا والقصائد.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we apologize that the audio is not very clear, and also apparently interpretation was not able to follow with the video. So we will try to put an action to it in English, French, and Portuguese and post it again as part of the documentations of this gender forum. Thank you so much for being a part of today's sessions and deliberations. We thank you all, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. And with this, we come to the end of day one of this gender pre-forum to the high-level dialogue, the 9th high-level dialogue. Tomorrow, we will begin the same time 1 o'clock Addis Ababa time. And we hope that you will be able to share the information about tomorrow's deliberations within your networks, so we can have more women as part of this discussion, but also more men to be part of this discussion as well, so that we can have clear outcomes and recommendations that could be presented at the high level dialogue next month. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of my colleagues in the AGA Secretariat, and also, of course, on behalf of Her Excellency, the Commissioner for Political Affairs, the host of the AGA Secretariat, I would like to thank you once again for being with us during this day one of this program. And we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, the same time, and we hope to see you in numbers. Thank you very much, and you have a wonderful afternoon. Goodbye.
Merci, ambassadeur Salah. Bon appétit, à demain.
Merci, Excellence. Merci beaucoup.
Okay. Merci à toutes et à tous. À demain.